Good morning to all and welcome to the session, the Hindu Editorial Analysis for Proficiency in English. Before we go to the editorial analysis, a quick look at enrichment from today's session. As usual, you will improve your comprehension skill, you will improve your effective vocabulary, enrich your word power, you will be able to consolidate your grammar knowledge, and you will learn a few idioms here and there which go with effective English and also mini mocks. Let us start with the question, what is this editorial about? This editorial is addressing the issue of voter turnout. There are two phrasal verbs you have to know. One is turn out, the other one turn up. In a way, both mean the same. There's one more, show up. All these mean appear, but subtle differences. What are the differences? Turnout goes with a large number of people. Here, voting, large number of people, we use turnout. Turn up and show up go with individuals. He did not turn up last evening. He did not show up last evening. These go with individuals. Very good. Naidu Paidi. This editorial is addressing the issue of voter turnout in India during the general election, particularly focusing on the first phase of the election held on April 19th. What exactly happened on April 19th? The first phase of general election. It's about the turnout on that particular day. What is the tone of the editorial? The tone of the editorial is informative and concerned because elections are being conducted during summer and a lot of areas people are experiencing heat waves. Concern, obviously. Today's editorial completely based on vocabulary. There's so many words. In fact, I had to cut down a few words. Worried about the time factor. Let us start with the first one. Incentivize, part of speech verb. Motivate or encourage someone to do something. You all know the noun form incentives. Incentive, noun. Incentives, noun. Incentivize, verb. Motivate or encourage someone to do something. Ambient weather, part of speech, obviously adjective, existing in the surrounding area. Ambient weather. Here you have to recollect the noun form, ambience. Ambience is a noun form. Incentive, noun. Ambience, noun form. Ambience weather. And one more thing you have to recollect when it comes to surroundings, there's an important word you have to know. Environs. Environs means surroundings. This has been given in many exams. Environment, environment different, environs different. Dissuade an important word, it takes a preposition from. Persuade not to take a persuade someone not to take a particular course of action. Persuade means encourage someone to do something, convince someone to do something. Dissuade, quite opposite. Persuade someone not to take up a particular activity. And it takes a preposition from. This is important. Constitute, verb. Constitution, noun. You all know that. Make up, form, compose. In this context, compose or form. Constitute a body means what? Form a body. Apparatus, singular. Apparatus, plural. Though an easy word because of the plural form I had to bring. Many of you may not know the plural form. You got to be careful with the spelling. Part of speech, obviously, noun. A person, I'm sorry, I could not, my mistake. Apparatus, equipment, simple word, what does it mean? Equipment. Machinery, two words you have to know. One is equipment, the other one, machinery. And humidity, part of speech, noun. Humid, adjective form. Humidity, noun. Amount of water vapor in the air. I'm sure you all know this. That's why I'm doing Vision Hub. That's the reason why I'm doing. It is not easy to understand on your own. Someone explains, it becomes easy. You can save your time. and you can learn a lot. Accumulate, we have got many a time part of speech verb to gather or pile up, especially little by little. A little would have been better. Small quantities keep adding up, accumulation. Accumulation is a noun form. Persist also, we have got many a time part of speech verb. Persistence, noun form. To continue, to exist past the usual time. Something exists for a long time, we say persist, persistence. Exacerbate, an important word they have given many a time, and we have got many a time. Part of speech verb. Make a problem, bad situation, or negative feeling worse. Something already bad, we make it worse. We use the expression, the word exacerbate, an important word. Persist, endure, tolerate. Ventilation. Ventilation, a common word, noun, the movement of fresh air around a closed space. There is no ventilation, usually we say. Commute, an important word, and the noun form for the person we say commuter, singular, commuters, plural. To travel regularly a distance between work and home. Usually I give the meaning commute to travel long distances for work. Commute. Tweak, part of speech verb, even this we have got many a time. To change something slightly, especially in order to make it more correct, effective, or suitable. Making the adjustments, tweak. Actually, it goes with design skills. In the same vein, an important idiom, though easy to understand, in the same style of speaking or writing, in the same spirit also you can say. Wrath, an important word. Wreath is different, wrath is different. Wrath, part of speech, noun. Strong, vengeful anger, very strong anger, we say, wrath of someone. It takes a preposition of. Pledge, again, familiar word, part of speech. It can be a verb, it can be a noun. To make a series of formal promise to give or do something. Pledge something. Huh. Show how to identify part of speech. That will take a lot of time. Every day you have to listen. And here I cannot do it. It takes a lot of time. At the most, I can tell the part of speech. If I do that, I have to spend more than half an hour only on these three slides. Certain things are not possible. You all have to understand. I am doing this to enrich your knowledge. It doesn't mean that it is a regular class, I can give all the information. A regular class, we do that. But here, to the extent possible, we give the information. We cannot go deep into it because of the time factor. Reconcile. This itself, I'm doing a lot, giving the part of speech, giving the related words, and telling where to use the combinations, all these. Reconcile, part of speech verb. To restore to friendship or harmony. Some, some misunderstanding, you try to patch up. Then we say reconcile. Protocol, an important word we have got many a time, part of speech noun, a system of rules that explain the correct conduct and procedures to be followed in formal situations. I give the typical example when the prime minister visits a particular state, the chief minister of that particular state has to receive the prime minister and has to accord a red carpet welcome. That is known as a protocol. Morbidity. At the time of COVID, we got comorbidities, one word they used many a time, but here only morbidity. The state of being symptomatic or unhealthy for a disease. Symptomatic or unhealthy for a particular disease. Comorbidity. A lot of diseases existing at the same time. These are the words, so many words, it has taken so much time. Let us see how it starts, what it is about. It is all about voter turnout. Hot button. Why is it hot button? Elections. I'll write here. Elections, summer, EVMs. You have to press the button. Because of the heat, hot button. On the water and heat exposure, as I said, all the three, and who is a key person here? on the water and heat exposure. At this stage, at this juncture, one has to go out to cast a vote. It is not an easy task because of the heat and the heat wave, both. What is the main idea of this editorial? Voters must be incentivized by minimizing risks due to heat exposure. Here, voters must be incentivized by how to motivate them. There is one way. Right now, what is the problem? The reason for writing this editorial on the day, the first phase, 19th, the voter turnout was low. Because the turnout was low, they started analyzing what could be the reasons. And one of the reasons obviously could be exposure to heat, fear of exposure to heat. Based on that, the main idea here, voters must be motivated, encouraged, or incentivized. How? By minimizing risks due to heat exposure. They have to minimize the risks due to heat exposure. If the voter gets exposed to heat, then obviously he may have to face a risk. That risk has to be minimized. Then they will have the motivation to cast a vote. Very simple. The Election Commission of India, ECI, suspects, doubts ambient heat dissuaded voters from ambient heat at a place, location, surrounding, dissuaded voters from. Dissuade means what? To persuade someone not to do something. In this context, discourage the voters from casting the vote. Dissuaded voters from turning out. A lot of people, we use a phrasal verb turn out, appear in greater numbers during the first phase of the general election on April 19th. The turnout was low. Based on that, the Election Commission suspects what could be the reason. The reason ambient heat. Ambient heat must have dissuaded voters from turning out in large numbers. It has since it has since constituted. There's a new pattern. Since that time, since so and so time, specific since time period for, and they go with present perfect tense. But here since has been placed in a different position for the first time that you have to catch or grasp. It has since constituted means that time, since that time. It has since constituted, formed a task force with representatives from itself. This sentence has a potential to appear in the exam. You may ask, sir, how will they ask a question based on this sentence? Here, what happens, the subject is it, third person singular. Here, based on that reflexive or emphatic pronoun itself. But here, they may change itself to themselves. Then it is not correct. Under pressure, not easy to spot the error. It has since constituted a task force with representatives from itself. Representatives themselves, some students focus on that word, may think answer no error, but it itself, the India Meteorological Department IMD, the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, and the National Disaster Management Authority to assess local heat and humidity for 5 days. Local heat and humidity, the amount of water vapor in air, for 5 days before each phase of polling. 5 days before the polling date, all these people together, the teams, going to work on, going to study or analyze or assess 5 days before the humidity. And one more thing, what is it? Heat and humidity. Before each phase of polling and work with state electoral apparatuses to ensure adequate facilities at booths. Why should they do that? Once they understand the temperatures are going to go up, obviously they will try to minimize the risk factor. That is the main idea of this editorial. And how can they minimize the risk factor? By providing adequate facilities at polling booths. The IMD declares heat wave conditions in a region depending on whether one of a few conditions is met. How does the IMD declare heat wave conditions? A particular factor has to be met, or a particular criterion has to be met. in a region depending on whether one of a few conditions is met. This also, one of a few conditions are met, they may give in the exam. But what is the subject here? One of a few conditions, one singular is met. What is this condition? Centered on deviations of the daytime temperature from the decade long average. Every area has decade long average and some deviation from the decade long average. Then the IMD may declare that particular day uh, something like heat wave condition. But these declarations are not concerned with the people's experience of ambient heat. These declarations have nothing to do with the are not concerned with the people's experience of ambient heat. Declaration is one thing, but they are not concerned with the people's experience of ambient heat because they may give the declaration, okay, today it has deviated from the decade long average, it is going to be, we will declare heat wave condition. But that is not a solution. They have to provide something to the people who come to cast the vote. Even without a heat wave, this is what, whether heat wave is there or not, they have to minimize the risk factor because elections are being conducted during summer season. Even without a heat wave, people of all ages are at significant risk if the relative humidity increases the wet bulb temperature beyond 30 degrees and they spend more than a few minutes outdoors. Heat wave or no heat wave, it doesn't matter, but the risk factor is always there. What is that? People of all ages are at significant risk if the relative humidity increases the wet bulb temperature beyond 30 degrees Celsius. There's something called wet bulb temperature. If it goes beyond 30 degrees Celsius, obviously people of all ages are at risk. And along with that, they spend more than a few minutes outdoors, not a few hours, a few minutes outdoors. Heat can also accumulate and persist in some locations more than others. When it comes, there are two factors we are talking about. One is heat, the other one is humidity. When it comes to heat, can also accumulate, build up, and persist, exist for a long time. In some locations, more than others. Depends on the location. For example, semi-planned or unplanned areas can exacerbate the risk of heat stress through poor ventilation. This goes with the infrastructure, particular area, the infrastructure. For example, semi-planned or unplanned areas can exacerbate, make the situation worse, the risk of heat stress through poor ventilation. No ventilation, and the place becomes, there's one word we use, stuffy. Imagine there's a room, a lot of people are there, no ventilation. Then you can say the room is hot, one expression. You can also say the room is stuffy. Stuffy means no ventilation. It has many meanings. Crowding, not install. What are the factors that may exacerbate the risk of heat stress? One is poor ventilation. Second, crowding. Third, not installing shaded resting spots. All these have to be provided. And overlooking heat radiated by asphalt surfaces, asbestos sheets, all those, they generate more heat. Second part talks about how to get more people to cast the vote. It gives the example of midday meals. Getting more people to vote is like getting more children to school, which the midday meal scheme contributed significantly to. Here, the preposition is at the end of the sentence. Usually, the literal meaning of preposition to come before. But I also tell offline classes, I tell students, prepositions may come at the end of a clause or end of a sentence. Here, end of a sentence. What it means, midday meal scheme contributed significantly to get the children to schools. We have to do something like that to get more vote, more people to cast the vote. The ECI would do well, an important expression, to implement similar measures to incentivize voting by minimizing heat exposure. Same idea is being reiterated. The physiological adversity we got quite often, we have been getting negative, something negative. The physiological adversity a voter may suffer when commuting between home and polling booth can be controlled to a limited extent by tweaking the polling dates and hours. There are two ways of tweaking or making the changes to minimize the risk, because the one who wants to cast the vote has to commute, travel long distance from home and the polling booth, from home to the polling booth. And this can be controlled by, to a limited extent, not completely, by tweaking, making the changes. One, the polling dates and hours. This is an important factor. Early hours, one thing, late evening, another thing. In the same vein, means in the same spirit in this context, rescheduling the elections to non summer months may spare voters the heat. Spare the voters heat means they can escape the heat, but not the wrath of some other elements. The anger of some other elements they cannot escape. But during non summer months elections, they can easily escape the heat factor. The task force must ensure every booth has shaded waiting areas with seating. All these about minimizing the risk, providing facilities to the people. One, the task force must ensure, already we have got must so many times, every booth has a shaded waiting areas. Has here talks about possession, not present perfect. Has what? Shaded waiting areas with seating. Second, airflow. Third, oral rehydration options. Four, sanitary facilities. Fifth one, fruits. Sixth one, updated first aid kits. Seventh one, wheelchairs. Accessible architecture. And medical services, every dozen booths or so. For every 12 booths, medical facilities. All these talk about the facilities to be provided at the time of the on the day of the polling to the people who turn out to cast the vote. Some additional needs go beyond the task force. Some more things have to be done, but they go beyond the task force. For example, the ECI is a pledge to increase voters' awareness of heat management protocols and provisions at booths should not encroach on the duties or resources of the accredited social health activists and must instead bank on a separate cadre. This talks about the role of the EC when it comes to creating awareness among the people. For example, the EC has pledged to increase voters' awareness of heat management protocols, procedures, and provisions at booths should not encroach on. We also use the preposition upon. Encroach means to enter someone else's territory. Here, whose job is that? Accredited social health activists, their job. They should not encroach on the duties or resources of the accredited social health activists and must instead bank on, depend on, rely on a separate cadre. They should have a separate workforce. The health ministry must also collect and share data about heat related morbidity and mortality, as well as reconcile its numbers with those of the National Crime Records Bureau so that officials can identify problems and institute reliable long term countermeasures. All these talk about the solutions, remedies. Besides the ECI, the health ministry must also collect and share data. Already we have got many a time data, single datum singular, data plural. Data can also be collective noun, then it takes a singular verb. And as well as, again, you have to recollect every time I tell, when we use certain expressions like as well as, with, together with, along with, the verb agrees with the first subject. Reconcile, patch up, or cross check its numbers with those of the National Crime Records Bureau so that officials can identify problems and institute reliable, dependable long-term countermeasures. If the election commission and all these organizations do all these things, then we can minimize the risk. That's what it says. It has taken almost 25 minutes, and this editorial purely based on vocabulary. In fact, so many words haven't brought. Here, mortality means what? Death. And reliable means what? Dependable, credible. So many words because already I have brought so many words. All these words are 30 minutes not enough. It has to go beyond that. That's all for today. Don't join at 7:30 because no mocks today based on this vocabulary based editorial, and try to join